Hi there. Welcome. I'm Roxanne Patel Shepalavi from the Philadelphia Citizen. Thank you all for being here tonight. So, first of all, in addition to this phenomenal event, I think you all know that it's election day, and if you don't, you still have time to vote. I will wait while you make your way to the door. Good. If you have voted and you can show us that you voted, feel free, please, to make sure you take some swag from the front. That's your reward for being a good citizen. In case those of you who don't know about the Citizen, we're a nonprofit media outlet here in Philadelphia. We use solutions journalism on the page and on the stage to revive democracy and citizenship in the American city where they were born. And this event tonight is part of a series we do called Development for Good, which looks at how public placemaking and private development can reshape the city to benefit everybody in it. I would like to thank some sponsors here: the Bellwether District and HRP Project, Brandywine Realty Trust, Campus Apartments, Clark & Cohen Property Loss Consultants, Darko Capital, First Trust Bank, and our partners for this series, Drexel University's Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation and Fitler Club. Let's just take a minute to thank the people at the Fitler Club who have provided us this beautiful space. And I'm just going to jump here and say, speaking of sponsors, I really appreciate them. They are the ones who allow our very small but mighty team of passionate journalists and change makers to make the Citizen happen and all the work happen. So if you feel so inclined, we would love to include you among our members. On our website, there's a little pink button at the top that says support the Citizen. So if you feel so inclined, please do. I just want to quickly tell you about the next in our series, which is on June 23rd with national housing expert Bruce Katz and Angela D. Brooks, who is Mayor Parker's housing czar and the person who has been brought here from Chicago to enact her homes agenda. So please mark that in your calendars. That will be here. And without further ado, let me please introduce you to Laura Slutsky, who is a director at Guidehouse, which is a global managing consulting firm where she co-leads the Housing and Community Solutions practice. She is going to be moderating the event today, and I'm going to pass it off to her and let her introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne, and to the Citizen for having us. I'm just going to open us up a little bit, and then we're going to get started with a conversation. Hope you all participate, and some information to get moving here. First of all, is this working? Everyone can hear us. Okay, great. Okay, great. So, as Roxanne mentioned, I'm Laura. I was here previously when I was the executive director of the Urban Land Institute here in Philadelphia, so it's good to see some familiar faces again. My current work is primarily with state, local, federal housing agencies, lenders, some developers, so always really happy to be able to dig into Philadelphia projects again. Some really inspiring leaders and organizations and projects that we'll talk about today. And we're going to focus in on the 15-minute neighborhood. So before we get into that, I'll just tell you quickly about the format here. We're going to hear a little bit about our two projects through some video and some photos, have a conversation, the three of us, about this work, and then be able to open it up to all of you. So save your questions. Thank you again for being here, and thank you again to the Citizen. So first, just to introduce our panelists, we have Charles Lomax, the chairman and CEO of Lomax Real Estate Partners, brings 25 years of real estate experience and played a key role in residential and commercial projects. Charles also serves on several boards, importantly for this conversation, including the John Bartram Association and the Philadelphia Accelerator Fund, and he is going to share his perspectives on the Village Square project. And here we have Kelvin Jeremiah, who has been president and CEO of the Philadelphia Housing Authority. That is our public housing agency since 2013. He's led significant reforms and developments, including revitalization of the Sharswood neighborhood. So that's the project he'll be sharing with us today. And previously, he's served, among many other things, as the IG for the New York City Housing Authority. And I'll pop in, if I can be helpful, to bring some stories from other agencies that we're hearing from around the country. So we're going to start off by looking through, and Charles, you can talk us through some of the slides about Village Square. So I will hand it over to AV to get that rolling. One of the first things that we'll talk about is sort of this concept of the 15-minute neighborhood, and something that I think a lot of projects and organizations have been trying to achieve around the country, looking at mixed use, mixed income, really engaging a community, providing all of the amenities that and interconnection that you want to expand and grow and lift up our city and our residents. So I'll give you that as kind of a frame, and interested to hear how everyone else approaches this topic. So, okay, awesome. We have our slides, so I'll hand it to Charles.
Hi, how y'all doing? And thanks for being here. So this is the Village Square on Haverford, and it is a mixed-use, mixed-income project that is comprised of really about 132 naturally occurring workforce housing units, a grocery store, an FQHC medical center, 32 LIHTC units, and then there are, it says 16 duplexes and 2 triplexes. I think we're going to end up with 18 duplexes, which are affordable home ownership units, which is really a really important component of the project for us. Right now, site number 3 has been completed, which is 32 LIHTC units fully leased. I think the next, and I'm going to get in trouble for not talking about WRD. We're relocating WRD to site 2 for the project. And on the first floor is going to be sort of a gallery and a coffee house, and then the second 2 floors are going to be offices and studios for the radio station. And that's a big amenity for the community to have that sort of community-based voice right there in Mantua. Number 4 is the 18 deed-restricted for-sale units. Number 1 is going to be the grocery store, the FQHC, and then 4 levels of 18 units each above that. And then above the site 1 is a parking lot for the medical center and the grocery store. And then to the right of site 1 is going to be another 40 units of housing. So that's, you can go to the next slide. And there you go, it's sort of laid out. Building 1 has 72 units above it, and then building 3 and building 4 are 40 units each. You can go to the next slide. And that gives you a sense of sort of the aesthetic of the project. You can go to the next slide. That's the site from looking down Mount Vernon Street. That's WRD and 20 of the 40 units of housing right there. You keep going. And then that's the medical center, grocery store, and the 72 units of housing. That's the site as it existed several years ago. The studio that's in the middle, which is not part of the site right now, potentially will be a part of the site, is not there anymore. And then the 32 LIHTC units are up in the middle of it towards, on the north side of the site. You can go to the next slide. So basically, what we do and how we do it is really based on the legacy of really my father and my mother as sort of socially conscious entrepreneurial folks who really, one of the things that was really a burning issue for my father was how do you economically empower the African American community? And that is something that we take very, very seriously, and as a sort of an ethos of how we do what we do and who we do it with. And so that's sort of the overview of what we're talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. So much that we'll be able to get into, but thank you for sharing. And I think part of what we wanted to start off with is making sure we've heard about these projects, but hear a little bit more so that we can dig in. So next, we're going to see a video from PHA about the Sharswood project. And I don't know if, Kelvin, you want to intro the video or say anything?
Well, the video highlights some of the work that we've done in Sharswood. Rather than talking over it, I'll just give you an opportunity to watch it, and then we can have a dialogue about it.
Over the past decade, the Philadelphia Housing Authority has embarked on an ambitious journey to redefine urban living for its residents. Established in 1937, PHA has long been at the forefront of providing affordable housing solutions. However, the challenges of aging infrastructure and concentrated poverty necessitated a bold reimagining of public housing. The Norman Blumberg apartments, constructed in the 1960s, stood as towering symbols of mid-century public housing. Comprising two 18-story towers, a 13-story senior high-rise, and multiple low-rise buildings, the complex housed nearly 500 units. Despite efforts to maintain them, these structures became emblematic of the challenges facing high-rise public housing nationwide. Recognizing the need for change, PHA initiated the Sharswood Blumberg Transformation Plan. In 2016, the Blumberg Towers were demolished, marking the beginning of a comprehensive redevelopment strategy aimed at revitalizing the Sharswood neighborhood. In place of the outdated high-rises, PHA introduced Blumberg 83 in December 2019. This development features prefabricated low-rise townhomes and walk-up buildings utilizing modular wood frame construction. Designed to blend seamlessly with the existing urban fabric, Blumberg 83 offers affordable housing options for residents catering to those earning between 20% and 60% of the area median income. Central to the transformation is the rejuvenation of Ridge Avenue. PHA's new $45 million headquarters, opened in 2019, serves as a cornerstone for this effort. The agency's decade-long plan, with an investment of $750 million, has reshaped Sharswood into a neighborhood of choice, integrating public and private developments with existing structures.
Every time I come to Sharswood, it kind of renews my hope in the city of Philadelphia.
When we started this project, folks said that it couldn't be done. Why were you investing over $750 million in a neighborhood that was once forgotten? And we said, no, we're going to put a stake in the ground, and we are going to redevelop this neighborhood for the people who live here.
This is a prime example of what happens when the city, the state, federal government, local agencies, and nonprofits work together to transform a community.
Education and commerce have also seen revitalization. The reopening of Vox High School and the introduction of new businesses along Ridge Avenue have provided residents with access to quality education and essential services, further strengthening the community's foundation. Through strategic planning and substantial investment, and a commitment to community engagement, the Philadelphia Housing Authority has not only transformed the physical landscape, but has also rekindled the spirit of neighborhoods once in decline. This decade-long journey stands as a testament to the power of thoughtful urban redevelopment in fostering vibrant, inclusive communities. To learn more about PHA's initiatives and how you can be part of this ongoing transformation, visit pha.phila.gov.
record, this project has aged me.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for giving us an overview. I think let's start just by hearing, from each of you, how you think about this theme that we're here to talk about today, and then we can go on in whatever paths we want. Like, what is a 15-minute neighborhood to you? How did you try to achieve that in your project? So let's start with you, Charles.
I really didn't think about it as a 15-minute neighborhood. So when we started thinking about it, the most important piece of this for the community was the grocery store. I now know way more about grocery stores than I ever thought I would. It's very, very hard business. But anyway, we searched high and low, got a grocery operator, and through just the way things go, the original operator backed out, and so we had extra space, and we decided to bring on Greater Philadelphia Health Action as a medical provider. And interesting story, my father was a physician, started practicing in South Philadelphia in 1958, and the people who embraced him and supported him were folks from the South Philadelphia Health Action, SPHC. And Mamie Nichols, Carl Moore, they were just like his protection. They helped him with the hospital relationships and so forth. And fast forward almost 50 years, South Philadelphia Health Action became Greater Philadelphia Health Action, and there are medical providers. So I think that's pretty interesting. It's a very Philly kind of thing. So anyway, we have these, we have healthcare, we have food security, we have mixed income, mixed use housing, we have rental housing, we have affordable rental with a big A, we have affordable rental with a small a, and we have home ownership, which I think is a really, really, really important component of the project. Because if you're we happen to be in the development path of Penn and Drexel, and if you own a piece of real estate in that orbit, it is, and especially if you can get it at a reduced price because it's a small A affordable, it's going to appreciate and it's going to be incredibly valuable over time. And so I think it's really important that opportunity is provided for folks in the community to have an opportunity to own those things. And so there's going to be a little bit more I'll tell you about those home ownership units. But so that's how we ended up with this 15-minute community development.
Yeah, awesome. Go ahead. I mean, I think, Kelvin, there's a lot of components, the grocery store, the mix. Go ahead.
I had the unfortunate experience of visiting our Blumberg Sharswood development one Saturday. So one of the things I do when I'm bored is to go at our sites when nobody's expecting me to, because you tend to get a different kind of reaction when they know that I'm coming. On this fateful Saturday evening, I encountered a person, and let's just describe him as an entrepreneur, wanting to sell me things. And at the time, listen, I'm an innocent boy from the islands. Somebody walks up to my car asking me about dimes and nickels. I asked him whether or not he needed change, and I didn't have any change. Half of you in the audience will have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's exactly how I felt. Until he, showed me that he was packing. Now, I'm a former IG. I think I'm a pretty good shot. I can take him, and I debated. I left that afternoon speeding out of there, and I promised myself that no one should leave like that. The fact is, as the night was coming in, there were no kids on the playground. The guys in white sneakers, the entrepreneurs in white sneakers and white shirts were coming out. Everyone seemed to have left, and they took over. In fact, there was a $5 million drug operation on one of our floors. And so that Monday morning I came back, and Blumberg Sharswood became the most important revitalization project for us. So what the video does not show you is a lot of the community engagement work that went into this initiative. And I think it's important to actually take a step back to put it in context. We have to revisit the past for a minute. So this was a 1960s public housing development, what I would consider failed public policy. The strategy at the time was, as some social workers have termed it, warehousing the poor. So 510 units concentrated on an 8-acre block, mostly black, deep poverty. Blumberg Sharswood represented, for me, not only failed public policy, but concentrated poverty, where all the indices of social pathology was at heightened levels. 80% unemployment rate. Murder rate, homicide rate was 5 times that of the rest of the city. All the dropout rates, the vacancy rates, teen pregnancy, just to name a few. And to boot, the 2 schools that provided education, ostensibly, for the neighborhood, both were shuttered. And no one said a word. So in a community that needed the facility the most, they lacked every amenity that you could that you would have expected. And in a neighborhood that is, about 8 blocks from Center City, from the Parkway, from the Rocky Steps, there were families who lived at Blumberg for 60 years who didn't know that the Rocky Steps were only 8 blocks away. And so when I listen to parents describing experiences that they themselves had, I thought it was fundamental for us to rethink that. And that's the priority. So we've come a long way indeed from where we were. And I would describe the plan as PHA being a facilitator, representing and facilitating the views, the aspiration, the vision of a community that was once neglected.
Amazing and super powerful. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to talk a little bit more, both about the community engagement piece, because you both really brought that up, and it's an important theme, I think, for the audience here, but also just sort of how we got started. I mean, these both seem daunting if we're thinking about how to tackle some of these old sites and mixed-use projects. I would love to hear from PHA about the Choice Neighborhood Grant and kind of that journey. And maybe if you can start, Charles, you talked about the grocery store as your anchor, but kind of how did you go from there? How did you start to bring organizations together, funding together? What was the thing that got you rolling to say, okay, we're gonna move this forward and keep going?
When we started, I think we started with the grocery store, 225 units of rental housing, and WRD. And went to the community, presented the plan, and it got shut down fiercely. What's interesting, one of the best decisions I've made as it relates to this project was when we first started, people were like, you need to hire somebody to engage with the community. And I was like, you need to hire this person, you need to hire that person. I said, you know what? I'll do it myself. I can talk to these people. It was absolutely the best decision I made because when I got to know them, got to develop a relationship with everybody, and then realized that, as is the case often in Philadelphia, that there are overlapping relationships that go back generations. And that was the case in Mantua. I have relatives who live there. I have like long relationships that my both parents have are in Mantua. So anyway, so that started, but then, the community, just talking with the community, they said, okay, what we want is we want less density, we want more parking, we want a grocery store, less density, more parking, and we want some home ownership. And so we went back to the drawing board, took the number of units, cut it in half from 225 to 112, we were going to do 2 triplexes and 16 townhomes with a parking pad, and came back and presented. They're like, wow, you actually, I didn't really realize how much pressure it would put on the economics of the deal by cutting your rental units in half, but
Sort that out
such
later.
is the case. But it worked out fine. And as a result of getting the support from the community, and the sort of the profile and type of project that it is, we've gotten support from the city, we've gotten tremendous support from the state, we've gotten support from PHA, we've gotten support across the board, and I think that's really what's needed. Is you really need to get a coalition, but so do the right thing and people will support it. You get the right people, the right idea, and you will get the support.
That's great, and I love that the community engagement process is what brought your project to the next step, not the other way around, and I think we've got an audience generally thinking about that and how to engage in this work and also move it along.
Just, you know what, for me it takes 4 meetings. There's distrust, and there's a legitimate reason why people distrust developers.
Sure.
So they, but after several meetings, and if you're, straightforward and, people's BS antenna is always up. If they figure that you're straight with them, they're going to start, and then you start seeing each other as human beings, and that's where the magic happens.
Yep. Awesome. So Kelvin, tell us about either kind of how you came from this vision, this need to tackle the neighborhood. We know you received, which I'm so excited about because I worked at HUD when we put this program together, but a Choice Neighborhood grant from HUD, which incentivizes planning and development for revitalization of former sites. So talk us through that and kind of where in your journey did that community engagement piece come into play, and how did you handle it?
Absolutely. Too often, I think, we approach the thorny issues of the thorny social issues with some level of skepticism that the people that we're serving don't know what they want, they don't know what they need. It's a kind of what I'd like to call perhaps social work colonialism. We don't believe that folks are capable of telling us how best to serve them or what their needs are. And so we always look to the really educated people at the Harvards, at the Kennedy School, for example. Nothing wrong with Harvard or Kennedy School. At some of the at some of those other institutions of higher education. In the case of Sharswood, my approach was not to dictate for the community what I wanted. This was not going to be a process that I would sit in my 5th floor office looking down and saying, these are the things that will work, these are the things that I want to have. In fact, we had over 40 partners, stakeholders from the community. We brought them together. Charles mentioned about 4 to 7 meetings. We had nearly 100 meetings. And I wanted to hear from the people who were going to be most impacted. I didn't, as much as I appreciated, frankly, the loudest voices, and in Philadelphia there are a lot of those, I quickly discovered that there are mostly some of the most uninformed people. And so I wanted, and they always come out to the meeting, and they always have an agenda. And I realized as we were going through this process with our residents, and by the way, when I speak about our residents, I'm not talking about just PHA subsidized residents, I'm talking about the community, because we were part of a community. I realized that as the loudest voices became louder, the folks who were most impacted stopped speaking. And with every meeting, I realized that there were folks who were becoming more vocal because we were doing more than 4 meetings, Charles, and because we were having it then not at the convenient locations for folks who didn't want to come into the community because of all of the reasons that I think some of us are aware of, they somewhat dropped off. And then we started to hear from the voices of the folks, and they had a vision. They wanted the same, their aspirations are exactly the same as yours and mine. I have yet to meet a PHA resident who wakes up in the morning and say, I want to live in the community with the highest crime. I want to send my children or child to the school where I know they will not learn and risk their health and safety in doing so. I want to be only shop in the 2 bodegas that provides limited healthy choices. What our residents told us is that they wanted to live in a balanced community that is safe. They wanted high-performing educational institutions where their children will learn. They wanted to be able to walk to a full-service grocery store. They wanted to have all of the amenities that you and I enjoy where we live. Essentially, they wanted us to address the drivers behind why people choose where they live. And those are the exact same things when I decided to move to Philly, I was looking at. I moved to Chestnut Hill. It was safe, high quality housing. The supermarket was literally, a 2.5-minute walk from my house. The schools were great. My daughter went to private school, 5 minutes down the road, getting a quality education. And for us, after hearing that vision, I wanted to only facilitate a plan that respected that vision.
Amazing. So we've had the consistent theme of going to the community, listening to the community. That's great. Let's talk about the money part, because I think, that can be a challenge and overwhelming. So if you could talk us through, and we can start with you, Charles, how you began to put your financing together to map this out. Since you listened to the community, you changed your structure, you cut your rental income down. How did you bring it forward?
So the affordable units were 4% LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, and then some grants from the state and city. The grocery store, 112 units, is initially we're going to use a HUD 221D4 loan, and it just got to be so complicated because the challenge with doing this kind of stuff is a lot of financing doesn't play well together. And so we were thinking of using modular construction, and HUD, was scratching their head about that. And so we put that aside, and now it's conventional financing, it's conventional debt, conventional equity, and a fair amount of RACP funding from the state. And we're actually looking at some new market tax credits as well. For the word building, it's just new market tax credits and some grants and so forth. And then for the for sale housing, it's just a revolver. Just they'll sell pretty quickly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kelvin, you want to talk us through?
$750 million later. When you guys are in business, most of you here, I'm sure, it's expensive to build anything in Philly if you're a government entity. And so, I made a deal with a mayor who wanted to see me succeed, I think, and who understood that this neighborhood was neglected for more than 50 years after the race riots of the 1960s ravaged through that neighborhood. There wasn't another public investment. And so he agreed to commit city general fund dollars. He committed home and CDBG. And then we looked to the state, and the state committed low-income housing tax credit, 4% and 9%. They also committed new market tax credits. Then we went to the feds, and the feds luckily gave us a couple of grants. I'm pleased to say that we've been really fortunate in our grant applications with the feds, having received now 6 CNI implementation and planning grants. And so with that, it allowed us to leverage a lot of private dollars. We issued, for example, for our headquarters public purpose tax exempt bonds that was allowed us to build. And that for us was the first major investment. PHA was going to serve as an anchor institution for that Ridge Avenue corridor for the Sharswood neighborhood. No pun intended to the folks here, that this was a building that I was offered to purchase. I respectfully declined at the time. Now I'm having second thoughts. If only I had the vision that I had for Sharswood here. And so, we leverage bank financing in some cases. We leverage public activity bonds. And all told, we were able to put together capital stacks that was unheard of. Gone are the days when I first started in this business, you could build something with 1 or 2 funding sources. In virtually everything that we've built today, there are 7, 8, sometimes 15 sources. There is crowd funding in Sharswood. There is opportunity zones. There is, as I said, bank mortgage financing. Shout out to PNC, Santander, and Wells. They've been especially good to us. But that's how you do it. We don't have the luxury of just relying on 1 or 2 funding sources anymore. And for us, this project and the others that we've done represented the perfect alignment of city, state, federal, and the philanthropic community, all working in tandem to remake this community.
Yeah, that's great. Did you want to say something about that? I heard you. No. So, and I can say, working with folks nationally, this is the hardest thing, because on top of the same funding sources can't always be used to put these projects together. Now the feds are changing programs, there's new requirements, they don't match up. So some agencies are getting into this work that haven't traditionally, they do social services or human services, but now they're looking at affordable housing development. So that's hard. So let's expand on that. What's been the hardest part? What's been your biggest challenge? Either, if you want to jump in there.
I mean, there's so many things that present themselves over the course of any project. And there's there are the sort of just soul-crushing days that happen because things just pandemic, the supply constriction, the supply chain, and the cost. So the thing is, and I was thinking about this. There's there's a mortgage banking crisis in 2008. There's always going to be something that you have to deal with. You know, there's the pandemic, there's supply chains, there's political uncertainty, but it's Tuesday. So it's just hard. This kind of stuff is just really hard. There's not like one hard thing. All of it is hard. It's just it's hard. I mean, and if it's hard for me, think about how hard it is for him, because it's like this is like
Jump in.
10x, 20x. I mean, it's hard.
Well, Charles' project was easy. He came to me, Kelvin, I need subsidies. I looked at the project, I said, yes, Charles. And then he went off and did it. Right, basically? I kid you. I think for me, the biggest challenge was this Frank Sinatra song that I had playing in my head when I moved to Philadelphia. Something about if you could make it in New York, you could make it anywhere. And he didn't live in Philly.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's been validated.
He did not live in Philly. So this is the city where all of the terrible things that have happened to in my career happened in Philadelphia. And it starts with, so I am somebody who pays very close attention to detail. I pay very close attention to data. I make what I would like to call data-informed decisions. And I would go in front of people who I thought were thinking adults, and I would make the case. And this is the only city where someone would stand up in the audience and say to me, Mr. Jeremiah, you're absolutely correct. I agree with everything that you said, the data, the information that I provided, but I still disagree. So for me, one of the challenge that we had to confront, yes, PHA, I came to the authority at a time when we were in some turmoil, and I understood, I thought that, you know, there is a level of mistrust or distrust, and that we needed to rebuild public confidence in the institution, in the work that we were going to be embarking. That was part of the reasons for those 100 meetings. It wasn't because I didn't have a life. I didn't, but part of that was to convince people that we were going to be doing right by them and signing on to agreements that represented the new values that we had. And so building consensus for the approach was a critical component. And, you know, so I come from a place where trust for us, for me, is repeated acts of credibility. So when I stand up in front of someone and I said, I will do this, yes, you'll have a right to return to this brand new development. Yes, I'm willing to put that in writing. So that's a great example. In the past, my predecessors would come to audiences of PHA residents, and they would have demolished, for example, a 1,000 unit development. And they would convince the audience, the residents, that they had a right to return. Except those 1,000 units that they had demolished was going to be replaced by 300 units. So they were not going to have, technically you could say they have a right, but you know, you're not building sufficient units for them to return to. And so when we started doing this, I literally entered into an agreement with each and every resident, giving them, and them alone, the fundamental right to return. And that said to them that we're going to subscribe to a one-for-one, one-to-one replacement strategy. My predecessors didn't have to do that. It was perfectly legal for them to do so. But I wanted to be honest with our residents in saying, you know, in this case, we're going to have sufficient units for you to return. The 510 units that were demolished at Blumberg Sharswood, they're being replaced one-to-one. We're building over nearly 1,500 units there. So they will have a fundamental right to return. And then the other piece that I struggled with, because I'm from New York, right? We read the papers. And I started reading the papers, you know. So somebody would call me and say, Kelvin, you're in the papers, and I would open it up. But, you know, I don't like the paper form. I would go online. And I don't know if you do this, but you scroll down in the Inquirer, if you go below, there are comments. I started to read the comments, and I started to get really angry. And those were comments from the loudest voices. And if you didn't know better, you would think that I was doing something directly to them that impacted them. And when you peel the onion a little bit, you realize that, no, they are from the suburbs someplace. They have never been to Sharswood, but they had a voice. And they were going to use that voice in a way that might be unsupportive. And then the third thing is, so there is this thing in Philadelphia where you're supposed to pay homage to the political elites. So I came, okay, real talk. Listen, I don't know if you guys know what an IG is. I was an inspector general, right? And so coming to Philadelphia was different. I said to everyone a simple fact that has characterized my now 14 years in the city. I don't owe anybody anything, and nobody owes me anything. I will only do what I believe is right. And so, thank you. I thought that everyone would applaud to this. And that is the very issue with the city. Because we think that somehow we can pay to play, somehow our values could be easily set aside, perhaps for political expediency. I want folks to be able to come to this work with all the idealism that I had. No one owes me anything, and I do not owe anybody anything. And adjusting to that here has been a bit of a challenge, not for me, but for all the people who knew somebody who knew somebody.
Okay, great. So we have every day is hard, Philadelphia is hard, sort of.
But I love Philadelphia.
But we love Philadelphia. Maintaining, I mean, that credibility and the, committing on on what we commit to and for carrying it forward has been the theme, which is great. I think I'll ask one more, and then we can probably go to audience to make sure we have time. But how do we do more of this? So, we're facing an interesting time. The local administration's picking up steam. We have a lot of engaged groups. These projects are inspiring and important and hard. So I would love just to hear both of your thoughts on how do we scale models like this, what you would recommend.
So for us, it's the partnerships. You really have to build great partnerships. We have our architectural firms in the audience, and they've been extremely great to work with WRT. They've been very, very helpful. Your financing partnerships, your banking relationships, so the way I think about these things, if I had a magic wand, what would I do? And the way that you could do more of this at scale is to get more support and subsidy with less strings attached. Because usually the requirements that come with the funding either significantly increase the cost or, just make it much more complicated. The challenge is that you're serving a lot of masters when you're doing this kind of work. You have your investors, you have your community, you have your banking relationships. I mean, and so it's all a balance. And so if you can streamline your funding sources with less requirements and strings attached, you can scale it and do more. But you really have to figure out you really have to take some of the inefficiencies in the system as they exist out. Otherwise, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be very, very complicated.
I got some snaps for that. What will you do with your magic wand?
So the mayor has proposed a very ambitious home initiative, and I think we can all applaud her for that effort. It's the first time since I've been here that the second floor in City Hall has made housing a top priority. But there are a lot of things that are still structurally requires some work. It is too costly to build. It takes too long to go through the regulatory process. Just imagine, if you will, from the time Charles and I have an idea to build a 30-unit building to the time that it takes to go through getting the funding in place, going through the regulatory process, zoning, permitting, that's an 18-month process. Then it takes another 15 months on average to build that thing. And if Charles is me, it will cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $550,000 to $600,000 to build what Charles is building privately at about $250,000. So that's the first thing. It is just too costly. And for those of you who are saying, well, Kelvin, you seem to be of average intelligence, you can negotiate with your union friends. There is something called the prevailing wages that dictates the wages I pay. Unlike most jurisdictions, 70% of my cost is labor. 30% is actually material. It should be reversed, actually. And so that's a real challenge. And that cost, added to those costs, are all of the regulatory stuff that we have to deal with. We go to, there are 5 different places in the city that you have to get approval from water department to streets, to parks and rec, you just name it. And they come with a whole slew of requirements that adds to the cost. So my advice, of course, if you take nothing else from this session, it's partner, partner, partner. Whether you're partnering with a person like Charles to get something done, you're partnering with your city council member, you're partnering with the mayor and her team. Partnering is a critical component of every single deal that we do. And then the other piece is leverage, right? You are not, if you're otherwise independently wealthy and you have a good stock of cash, $20 million, even if you were to give that to me for free at a cost of 0% interest, I would only be able to probably build maybe 38 units. All right? If you give me that $20 million and you say, Kelvin, I want you to do something on a grander scale, I can leverage that with other funding that I have, that Charles might have, that I might get from the city, and it goes a whole way further than what that $20 million is. And so you have to find those those partnerships, the leverage opportunities, it could be with the banks, it could be with other government entities. PHFA, for example, is a critical partner to us. OHCD, Division of Planning, HUD, and others. And then where you can get free money, it's not always free, but where you can get cheap money, whether it's through philanthropic partnerships, you do that, you seek those out. The 6 grants that we received from HUD, we were able to leverage that. The $50 million for Bartram, as an example, we were able to leverage that to raise another $400 million. And so there are a whole host of other opportunities that exist. And be patient. It will take time. And feel free to kick somebody, scream at somebody, yell at somebody, not your spouse or significant other. And you'll get there. We'll get there.
Great. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'll go around the room and take some questions. So make them questions. There's no speechifying, please. I'll start with you.
So my question is for Charles.
Say who you are.
Oh, sorry. Thomas Lopez Pierre. I'm from New York, and I manage a social impact private equity real estate fund. We're investing $1 million with 10 entrepreneurs, $100,000 each in real estate here in Philadelphia and in Baltimore. My question for you is, after watching this video, your father is my role model. I raise the bulk of our capital from black doctors. So my question for you is, what was his values, and how did he maintain this family wealth as a father of a 19-year-old and 15-year-old twin daughters? How was he able to maintain this legacy where now you are basically using the word that rich white people use, which is family office? Thank you.
So he would say he didn't plan any of this. If you ask me, he had a high pain threshold and a great sense of humor. So, but in all seriousness, it was an iterative process. We moved I was born in West Philadelphia, 46 in Larchwood, and he was born in South Philadelphia. My mother was raised in West Philly, and he moved us from West Philadelphia to Bucks County in 1968. And nobody wanted to go. All there were farmers. It was just like, it was the end of the world for us. But all we had is each other to play with. We were in the middle of nowhere. We just hung out with each other. And that, over time, we developed this incredibly strong familial bond. And the other thing is that for somebody who was sort of a serial entrepreneur who worked all the time, he spent a lot of time with us. I mean, that's the most important thing that kids want is time. They don't want Barbie dolls, they want toys. They want time with their parents. And we're fortunate enough that he spent a lot of time with all of us, and that evolved into the type of relationship that we had. We ended up working together, and we ended up having sort of not just a father-child relationship, but a business relationship, and he tolerated that. I mean, I don't think it was simple for him, easy for him, but he was firm and he was thoughtful, but he was direct, but he was also, very supportive. And so for whatever reason, everybody fell into their role, and now we're doing what we're doing. So.
Who else? Okay, say who you are.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and this is a question for both of you relative to your projects. I wonder if you, based on community engagement as a concept, are hoping to develop resident organizations for these two projects. I mean, there are resident ROs across the city, and I wonder if it would be advantageous in your projects.
it's a prerequisite for PHA. When I came to PHA, we had 13. We now have about 67.
Did you institute that policy, or was that
Absolutely. Well, it's what we refer to as 964. It's encouraged. It's not required. It's required for me.
And so for me, I was just fortunate that Mantua is a really, really well-organized community. And the Mantua Civic Association was there from the very beginning. They knew exactly what they wanted, like Kelvin said, wanted the same thing everybody wants, and made it very clear, articulated it to me, and they've been, it's been just fantastic. They've been very supportive. If somebody's walking around doing something they're not supposed to be doing, I get a phone call. So it's just wonderful. So it's great.
Kelvin, I actually have a question, which is, you said that everybody who was displaced for the building was guaranteed housing, a return.
A right to return.
A right to return. And it was at the same price that they were paying, or?
No one at PHA pays more than 30% of their income for rent. And so it's based on their income. The only time that will change is if they have changes in their income. I'm pleased to say, though, that we've had changes in folks' income, and that's a good thing. When I came to PHA, the average household income was $9,600. It's now hovering around nearly $24,000. So we're making progress, and with that, I'm selfish. For every job training program that a resident goes through and successfully completes, they have an opportunity for over a 3-year period to phase their rents in, but ultimately they get to pay still 30%.
Great.
Bill Donahue, I do community development in North Philadelphia. Mr. Lomax, let me say to you first, to your family, the legacy that this family has built in this city is incredible. And the service that you have provided, absolutely amazing. When I think of the Lomax name, there's another name that pops into my head from the neighborhood that I'm in, and that's the Reverend Dr. Leon Sullivan, and that legacy that is still ongoing today. So thank you for what you've contributed here and continue to do. Mr. Jeremiah, I've followed you for a while and have been watching Sharswood with some interest. I was particularly taken by your commentary and the way you tap dance through that minefield that is Philadelphia politics. And I'm in an area where the center of my universe is an Amtrak station, the second one in North Philadelphia. We're going to become an outpost of New York City because of that station. I cannot wait for them to get there. And you're the reason why. This attitude, the way your vision. Scripture tells us where there is no vision, the people shall perish. We have a lot of people perishing in this town because there's been a lack of vision. What PHA is doing is very visionary. My question is to both of you. I'm in a neighborhood that's the poorest zip code in Philadelphia, one of the most violent, with a hospital that is the busiest trauma unit in this city. And the money that's coming is coming. And when it does, my legacy residents are out of there by the playbook that's already in place and has been in place for some time. Do you have a suggestion as to how I might get ahead of this and prevent that from happening? Because the pressure is going to be absolutely phenomenal.
So your question is, how do you prevent gentrification from happening in your neighborhood?
So for me,
Not preventing gentrification. We want them. We want them to come. What I don't want is my legacy residents getting the boot.
Right.
They've been paying their taxes. They're going to work. They keep the law. They're good residents. They're good neighbors.
Right. I think they understand.
so
perhaps
home ownership. You gotta hold on to home ownership. You gotta figure out how to keep. So the tax abatement, they changed the abatement law. you got to figure out a mechanism so people that have been there, because Philadelphia has a tremendous opportunity. It's leaving us quickly because we're not New York, we're not DC, we don't go too high, we don't go too low. Philadelphia is what Philadelphia is. And we still have a fair amount of land. We have to figure out how to structure it so that people who are here and live in these communities can stay in these communities and afford to. That's what I mean. They got to figure out a more efficient way to, and it needs to be done, for us, by us. We need to structure it so that people in the city who have been here benefit from that. Like I told the folks, these 18 places that are for sale, or deed restricted, I'm not doing this so somebody can get a great deal. I'm doing this for people in this community. And that's an important idea, and it's an important tool that we have to figure out how to keep people in these communities and let them benefit from that home ownership, because that's how wealth is created.
Will you please allow me to be a part of this conversation? I've been waving my hand here and that's kind of avoiding you.
I will. I think Mr. Jeremiah would like to answer that previous question.
So I understand that change is hard, and for most of us, we don't like change. But I think perhaps Sharswood could be instructive. What we sought to do is to build or rebuild and revitalize and build a balanced community. You have a voice in that. And so one of the goals that I set out at the beginning was the goal of not displacing a single long-term resident. We believe that they, and I've said this and I've gotten into trouble for saying it, but I wanted at the end of the process that now that the community that we were revitalizing was becoming fashionable again, I would want those people to benefit from that who lived in it when it wasn't fashionable. And so, we spent, and you have to be intentional about these things. So we've spent approximately $1.5 million working with the private homeowners, the Mr. Walters, who had a home that he had lived in for more than 60 years, who was collecting, I think, something around $840 on Social Security. He couldn't afford to go anywhere else. We wanted him there. And so we improved his home, the facades. We went in with Habitat for Humanity. We made improvements to his kitchen and bath. We did roof repairs, all of those things so that those families could remain. And they did. And they're still there. Now that their property values have gone up, they're enjoying all of the amenities. But you have to have that voice, and you have to let your friends in government. What is really exciting about folks for me and Charles that build stuff is the availability of the land. A lot of the land that is in public ownership, if you are going to leverage that, my considered opinion is that should be leveraged for the public good because it is in public ownership. The private market don't need that help, in my view. And so let them know where you stand. And if we can have all of the concessions that myself and others get in terms of when we're building, not so much me, perhaps more Charles, you should be able to benefit from the increase in economic activity that comes to your neighborhood. And then I will tell you, you participate in what happens in terms of the design of what is coming. One of the things that I didn't want to do was to going and build these really contemporary structures that I think some of which might be offensive to the existing residents who are living next to these that there is no rhyme or reason for it. We wanted to make sure that we were replicating to the extent that we can the facades that existed. So where we had a 2-story building, a private ownership, we weren't going to put up a 4-story. Where we had a 3-story, we're going to match that with a 3-story, and so on and so forth. You have an ability to help influence that. And again, it goes back to what Charles said, partnership, partnership, partnership. You have to say yes to something. What is it that you're going to say yes to?
So did you mention that the buildings were modular? Does that make them less expensive to build?
Not in Philadelphia.
Okay. Hold on, let me.
That shows to your comment that that type of development helps to maintain property values in the existing neighborhood.
Exactly.
The other side of that is the values, the existing, when they're built, the way you described them, the new buildings. It devalues the properties.
I don't build those, so, you know.
So I actually forgot to mention earlier that one of the people in our audience here is Kyle Sampson, who is the state's real estate commissioner, who's over here.
Hey.
So hopefully he's listening carefully to all of the things that are difficult and going to help make that happen. Okay, question, no speeches, right?
Well, I just want to be part of the conversation. That's all. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks. Calvin. My name is Kelvin Williams, and I am 75 plus, and I am a 19121 zip code, North Central Philadelphia lifer. And the opening video, that shot of John F. Reynolds School could have been taken from our home where we lived in the 2400 block of Jefferson Street. We are a 3-story house, and we can look out over the 2-story houses. But I just wanted to let everyone know that this is the tale of 2 cities. We had the best of times and we had the worst of times. We were first moved from the matter of fact, welcome to the neighborhood. You're at the 1400 block of Ridge Avenue.
Yep.
My whole life has been between the 1400 block, between Jefferson Street and Master Street, and 1 block north and south of that. We were moved from the 1400 block of North Camac Street, just east of Broad Street, to make room for Yorktown.
Yep.
When we was displaced, that's where we came to the 2400 block of Jefferson Street. There was no Sharswood when we came in the 50s. There were no Bloomberg in the 50s. Where the Bloomberg Projects is right now, my first wife's parents lived. We are still in the neighborhood. Matter of fact, I'm still in the neighborhood in Strawberry Mansion. My children still live in the neighborhood. And when I say to you that there is something wrong when we want to rebuild a community and we eliminate the Reynolds School, an elementary school, the John F. Reynolds Elementary School, and I can still look over my house and I can see the Vaux. It was a junior high school, not a high school. And those 2 schools made me who I am and everybody in that neighborhood. And we got great people that came out of there. And it behoves me. It's almost similar to someone's trying to build a professional winning basketball team by bringing in people and training them to lose. How can you have a community that you're going to bring back and eliminate the most important thing? It's beautiful down there. I love it, and I love the work you've been doing. But who do you talk to that you cannot see the essence and the importance of children in elementary and junior high school coming through that neighborhood to be the best who they can be? How did you fail that way?
Good. Thank you.
How did I fail that way?
Not personally. It's just that
Well,
you have a community.
So fact.
Those things are important in building the community. It was important to us.
So
Let me
let me respond. First and foremost, I think I spoke at the top about the drivers for folks choosing where they want to live. And one of the things that I mentioned was the educational facilities that are in the neighborhoods. Mr. Williams, I remember you well. And Mr. Williams, you know, as a matter of fact, that Kelvin Jeremiah and PHA did not shutter Reynolds, nor did we shutter Vox. The two schools that I mentioned at the top were both shuttered in a community that I would argue needed them the most, right? I'm not in the education business necessarily, but one of the things that we did was to bring back the high school at Vox. And those two buildings, after they were shuttered, were blighted. The facilities that you were educated in, and I commend you for getting through it, both of those facilities offended me to my core. And don't get me started, because I can go into a whole diatribe about that. But in bringing it back, we decided, I didn't run the school district. I worked for about 3 years convincing the school district that this is a neighborhood whose children, if we were going to bring them back, needed to be provided with a world-class educational facility. I don't receive money from anywhere to do that. We spent over $15 million to make Vox an acceptable place where children that look like me and you could go and to learn. It wasn't. We provided there a $500 per student subsidy, something no other public housing agency in this country has done because of that value. We reopened Vox with a 9th grade class of about 125 kids. We are now in I think our 7th year. That first inaugural graduating class, over 90 of the kids went on to college. In fact, one of those kids received over $1 million in scholarship offers. The last year's graduating class, sir, received over $21 million in scholarship offers. These are kids that look like you and me, first. These are kids who never believed, or perhaps didn't believe before then, that they had that possibility. We created, because education is what saved me from poverty, frankly, we created the Philly Seeds program that has provided over $3 million to date to kids in public housing. I think we're doing okay on that front.
Thank you. Who else has a question? Oh, here we go.
My name is Kevin. Actually, I'm part of the Sharswood project. My company, I'm a registered master plumber, and we did 52 houses between 23rd and 24th Street at Sharswood. And we did 20th and 21st and Master. The question was, what are you doing to train some of the people that's in there, in the projects? Because I did a project for you guys, 12th and Fairmont, and part of the criteria was you had to hire a neighborhood person. But now, I've trained 3 master plumbers now, and I got one guy from jail and one guy was hooked on drugs, but now, I mean, they're productive members of society. But they made us pick one resident from Gladys B. Jacobs when we did that project. But on a project on Charwood, I didn't see where they had to use any residents as part of the work.
So you're telling me that you violated your contract by not hiring a PHA resident or a Sharswood resident? If you got a contract from PHA, it requires Section 3 compliance, and we believe that given the economic engine that is PHA, that the folks who have traditionally been outside of it should be afforded an opportunity to participate. And so, the Vox is 225,000 square feet. It also boasts our workforce development center. We have classes there ongoing. If you're in plumbing, I'd be happy to give you any number of kids who are willing and wanting to be plumbers. You hire folks from former returning citizens. I'd be happy to help you hire PHA residents. The reason, and I might have mentioned this, the reason that we've seen increases in household income is because of the intentional action and programming that we have implemented for PHA residents that included the program that you're referencing, which is the Section 3 program. We want that. We want to continue to work with the plumbers, with the BCTC trades. We have any number of programs. The electrician, for example, at Vox, we partnered with them to train PHA residents in the trades to become electricians. Some of the best ones that I know are now PHA residents. And so I'm happy to work with you on that.
I have a question. I think both of your projects are also providing jobs for people in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Do you have a number on that? Do you know how many will be employed?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I can tell you that in Sharswood, the numbers far exceeded what we expected. I think in terms of MBE Section 3 participation, all have been well in excess of 40–50%.
I do not have the numbers, so. Sorry.
But they're long-term numbers, right? I mean, because there's people who work in the health center and the hospitals and, I mean, the grocery stores.
No, absolutely. The grocery store, for example, grocery outlet, that facility has 35 employees. 31 of those are PHA residents.
And I'll just add, we talked about, how to get financing with fewer requirements, which makes sense. The Section 3 requirement is is any project that receives federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has a requirement that you encourage local hiring. So this is, one of the good things. We have two projects that have gone above and beyond. It's one thing to say we've made this effort that the feds require us to do. We check the box, but it's another to provide deep community engagement, workforce opportunities, and meaningfully engage and employ the community in this way. So that's a positive.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question, if there is one. Over here.
Oh, sorry, should I sit? Hi, Mr. Lomax and Kelvin. My name's Ambika Singh. I am an economic development director for the Riverside community in Wilmington. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's also a choice neighborhood. Thank you so much for all your information. I'm trying to take what you guys have been doing and implement it in Wilmington. One of the projects I'm working right now is selecting our grocery store. We're a food desert. And I was just wondering what were the main factors going into selecting your grocery store?
Start and end with the grocery store. I love this. Full circle.
Were they bankable? So I talked to I don't know, 4 or 5 different operators. We talked to Grocery Outlet. We talked to, and you know, it's a 1 or 2% margin business, so it's a really, really hard business. What happened is I ended up with a hybrid. I have a, I don't know if anybody here has been to Palm Tree Markets. The Palm Tree Markets is it's sort of a high-end little efficiency store, you know. And the owner of Palm Tree Markets and the owner of the Newcastle produce outlet are coming together to form a company called Green Story Farm, and they're going to be our operators. And this is after, I mean, it was just trial and error, one frog after another, just, you know. And these guys are, they're very good, and they're very committed to doing this, and they're very committed to doing this the way we really want it to do. So it's really, there's no secret. There's no secret. Kelvin put his finger on it. So I'm going to end with this. I'm going back to school in 1985, driving my 65 Ford van back to preseason, and coming from Bucks County, stopped at Jim's to get a cheesesteak in 4th and South. Pull off, get on the on-ramp going on to 95 about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a Rasta hitchhiking. And I said, hey, man, you want to ride? I said, where are you going? He goes, South Carolina. I said, oh, man, you're in luck. I'm going to North Carolina. I'm going to give you a ride to there. He goes, oh, my God, I've been here since 8 o'clock in the morning. Faith and patience. Faith and patience. That's all you need. So that's my takeaway. You know, any of this, faith and patience. That's it.
My days. Well, in addition to faith and patience, you're going to get a lot of grocers coming to you. Their primary concern, because it's such a small margin, would be the demographics, the household incomes of the community, the population in that community. They have those things down to a science now. And remember, and by the way, you guys came in before us on that last CNI grant. I think it had to do with the guy that was sitting in the White House. I'm not going to hold that against you. But I'm reminded of that, because you said where you're from. But I think because they're concerned about the population, you have to move people out before you bring them back. At what point do you build? And so for us, we were looking at Sharswood that we had just depopulated, and as much as I would try to convince the operators that we were going to repopulate the neighborhood, when they looked at it, there wasn't enough people there to have a full-service grocer. I built it anyway. You might have to also put money into it to incentivize a full-service grocer to come into an area that traditionally they might not want to come to. You have to sell them on your plan, and they have to become a partner in it with you. So when we were building, we had, I think, 3 different agreements with 3 different operators, all of whom failed us. They were doing it for whatever reason, right? And so you're going to get rejected. You're going to lose a couple of the deals before you get the one that really should be there. We found that in Grocery Outlet. They were affordable. They provided high-quality goods. They were willing to hire from the community. This was a neighborhood that didn't see a grocery store for 50 years. And so there was a story there. The person who was going to be the operator, his family was from public housing. And so I wanted to make sure that in telling that story, we were going to be investing not just in the brick and mortar, but in that individual as well, and that we were going to put money towards it. The commercial corridor that was built by an MBE firm, we put in at least half of the capital needed at a very, very low rate. I won't do that again, but you might have to come out of pocket a little bit in order to make it worth the while for an operator to invest in the community.
Our operator was a loss leader. You know, we had to discount the rent
Yep.
substantially to get them to come in.
Yep,
Yeah, so but that was the most important piece for everybody.
absolutely.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. You were brilliant and engaging, right? And thank you to all of you for coming. See you next time.